In the summer of 2017, my wife and I visited Iceland and France. I have another presentation on Iceland and Northwest France. In this particular presentation, I'll talk about Paris, France. This is the country of France. It's about the size of Texas and has about 67 million people. What we're looking at right here is what we call metropolitan France. It's what we consider the actual country of France. There's other territories of France that are part of France, such as Réunion, which is an island nation or island in the Indian Ocean, French Guiana, which is in South America, St. Martin in the Caribbean, and even a small island off the coast of Canada. Looking at the map here, you can see it's bordered by the Bay of Biscay on the west, which is just an arm of the Atlantic Ocean. In the north, it's separated from England and the United Kingdom by the English Channel. In the south, by the Mediterranean Sea. And then we have some physical political boundaries between France and Spain. Here are the Pyrenees Mountains and a little country here called Andorra. And then we have the Alps that run from pretty much southern Germany and that form the border between Switzerland and Italy. We actually have another country right here called Monaco, which is a small country located inside or on the coast of France. France is separated into a number of different administrative regions. I believe there are 13 in metropolitan France and about 101 departments. Paris, which we're going to talk about today, is located in the Île-de-France administrative region, which has an area of about 4,000 square miles, about half the size of New Jersey or the size of Connecticut. So we have a lot of people put into there. Paris is the capital of France, and you can see where it's located in respect to France. And it's got a population of about 2.3 million people, the actual city itself, and an area of about 40 square miles. By comparison, the city of Durham has an area of about 108 square miles and only about a tenth the population. So when we talk about arithmetic population density, Paris is inordinately high. The Île-de-France region or department has a population of about 12 million people. So about 1/5 of the entire country lives in this particular region right here. In 1950, it was the second most populous country in the world. Today, it's not even in the top 20. So when we talk about urban geography, we're going to talk about cities like Karachi and Jakarta and Beijing and Mexico City, which have, especially some of these in these developing countries, which have far surpassed the population growth of your traditional larger cities or world cities such as London and Paris. This is a map of France, and the map of Paris in particular right here, so you can actually see the outline of Paris here, and you can see a relative scale here. This is the Louvre. This is the Eiffel Tower that I'll talk about later, and the distance between them is only about 2 miles Euclidean or crowfly distance, and it's cut through by the Seine River. Then we've got a couple of islands in the Seine River. We have Ile de la Cité, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is the actual border of Paris. So it's relatively small, and like we said before, it's 40 square miles. So it's about 2.5 times smaller than the outline of the city of Durham. The most identifiable landmark in Paris is probably the Eiffel Tower. You can see my wife and I on a bridge here. You can see the Seine River in the background, but it's constructed in 1889 for the World's Fair. It's 1,063 feet tall, and it was the tallest building in the world until 1931, when I believe the Chrysler Building in New York City overtook it. We talked, and you can see another picture here. We talked about the Ile de la Cité, and on that is the Notre Dame Cathedral. This was constructed, the construction for this began in the 1100s. And you can see the ornate construction on it. It's amazing. And this is from the back, and you can see the flying buttresses and whatnot here. And this is on an island in the middle of the Seine River. Another one you can see is the Louvre. This is basically a large art museum, and what you see behind is a palace that was turned into one of the largest museums in the world. So this was actually a palace for a single a single person here, and you actually enter and go down, and then the actual building is all around here. And it's just amazingly large. I think one of the facts that we saw was that if you were to look at each exhibit for 30 seconds, it would take you more than 3 months to visit it. And you can see some of the building, some of the artwork that we have. There is the Venus de Milo, which is a Greek statue of Aphrodite, and then the Mona Lisa, which is probably the most famous one here. What you see here is the River Seine, or the Seine River, separates the river with the left and right bank based on where you're facing downstream. Notre Dame, like I said before, is actually located on an island in the city, and we saw this Pont des Arts bridge. You see these love locks here, and here they're a little bit, I don't want to say touristy, but you're allowed to buy a lock and put it on there. They were on there permanently, and they're removed every so often. But at one point in time, when all of these locks were removed in 2015, it had added an extra 45 tons to the weight of the bridge. Now they're removed on a regular basis. We thought this was interesting, and all of these bridges are very, very different. Near the Louvre is the Tuileries Gardens. We thought this was kind of very interesting. Paris is known for their gardens, and I'll show a couple of other ones here, but we thought this was interesting.
Okay, this is a video, so we're
And
in
you can
this
see a video here
Paris
of Tuileries
Park.
Gardens.
Fountains, buildings, manicured yards.
That's the Louvre in the background.
But who needs a lawnmower? Just get yourself a goat. He's eating the grass. He is not, nobody's noticed him but me and Tim, I think. And I hope he turns his little head around here, but hey! Oh well. Anyway, okay, this is
Another garden is the Luxembourg Gardens. It's home to statues. So you can see some of the beautiful pictures of the pictures of the beautiful statues there. One of the interesting things that I saw was a lot of times you have to pay to go to the bathroom. There are not a lot of accessible bathrooms around. So we had to pay, and this was for about 50 cents, so a little bit more than, it was about 55 cents. These are in euros, and I'll talk about the exchange rate in a little bit. So, when you have a chance to go for free, make sure you go, because bathrooms are typically few and far between. This was the Arc de Triomphe. It's about 165 feet tall, and it was built in 1806 by Napoleon. It's at the junction of about 8 different streets with a circle going around it, so you can see the traffic that goes around it. One of the interesting things about this traffic is that it's different than other circles. Typically, people entering the circle need to yield. In the circle around the Arc de Triomphe, the people who are in the circle have to yield to the people from these 8 different streets, to the people driving around, driving into it. So it was interesting. You can see some of the motorcycles and their bicycles that go around it from time to time. So it was just amazing. This is the Pantheon. And this is a large church and burial hall. Is originally dedicated to Saint Guinevere, but a lot of the noble from France and famous people from France are buried there, such as Victor Hugo, Rousseau, and Voltaire. And just amazing here. Also shopping. This is called Galeries Lafayette. It's located on Haussmann Street, which is just north of the Opera Hall. And it's an upscale store that has about 10 floors attached to it. And there's a whole women's store and a whole men's store. So it's just amazingly large. Just outside of Paris, in Giverny, or Monet's Gardens, we're about an hour north. Claude Monet, the famous Impressionist painter, moved there in the 1890s until his death in 1926. So you can see the beautiful gardens, lily pads, everything that he's painted there, and his house is open to visit in his gardens. So you can see the famous lily pads in the background. And that's about an hour outside of Paris. It might still be in the Ile-de-France region or department. And so you can see his actual house. In terms of way of life, there's a lot of traffic. So the map that I showed before, public transportation is very good. There's a lot of excellent subways. Subways can take you from Charles de Gaulle Airport all the way downtown. So while we were in Paris, we never had a need for a car. It's probably more of a detriment to have a car than it is to actually use walking in public transportation, which are much better and cheaper options. So this is, what you look at on some of the streets here in terms of the traffic goes on the same way that we have in the United States, so that was never an issue when we rented a car. And you can see some of the traffic here. And then this is the Paris Opera Hall right here. And then behind it was the Galeries Lafayette that I mentioned before. And this is just a picture of a subway. So I know what the word sortie means these days. That's the exit. But you can see the subway. They're all relatively clean. And like I said before, it's got excellent maps that can pretty much take you anywhere that you need to go. In terms of way of life, I just thought of a couple of neat things that I would mention, and this is not specific to Paris, but also the rest of France. A lot of baked goods, breads, and you can see how much they cost. This is sandwich is about 4.35 euros, so this is about $4.60 or so. So the cost of living or the cost of goods or whatever, and it's about the same as the United States. Interesting thing is that everything is already pre-taxed. So when this says $4.35 or €4.35 or $1.50, that's what you're giving to the person at the cash register. So a lot of times you won't see 1 cent, 2 cents, anything like that. You're not going to have to bother with carry around pennies or whatever they're called, cents. So you can just see there's a lot of baked goods. A lot of pastries, which we found to be really good. This was chocolate chips with bread in those, and then you can see some of the sandwiches. So you can see how much some of these things cost. What you would spend on a typical lunch or whatever. They also have McDonald's there, so you can see it looks like some of the sizes are a lot smaller than what we saw. They have fast food. Maybe I'll talk about that in my next talk. And I also liked a lot of the candy here. So there are a lot of candies, chocolates, and whatnot that I thought were really interesting. And then the last thing we saw, Coca-Cola. I've never seen this green one here before. That's why we thought it was interesting and took a picture of it, but it might be around. But you can see, a can of Coke here at a local supermarket costs about 75 cents or so. And that's about it.